Hi friends, welcome to another episode of Studio Talent Collective, and today we are talking about systems for training your staff. This is actually a very important topic because you're about to step into the new year, and training is a critical point in the business where you get to shape the outcomes for 2026 and beyond. You get to shape the culture. You get to shape how people are going to behave and operate within the walls and the confines of your studio business. It is essential. So if you haven't got your team training set up yet, I would be selecting dates now and communicating that to your team. So let's start talking about what that actually might look like and what your training session could and should potentially look like in the new year or before the new year kicks into gear, depending on what time frame you choose. But it's definitely got to be on your radar even now during show season. And it could just be as simple as a save the date. But let's talk about that, the when, the how, and the what to actually put into your training session for your staff so that you can have a great year ahead. All right, let's kick in.
I'm Josephine Lancuba, and welcome to Studio Talent Collective, the podcast for dance and performing arts studio owners. Here we share industry insights, inspiring stories, and real talk to help you build a thriving studio and in-house talent agency. As a performing arts business coach and talent agent, I'm all about dreaming big and growing together as a community. You're in the right place. Let's leap in.
Hey studio owners, if you've been juggling too many tools to manage families, payments, and marketing, there's a better way. It's called ENROLLIO, an all-in-one system built just for dance and performing arts studios. This week, they're offering a fast track setup worth $497 AUD, completely free for the first 15 studios. Go to enrollio.ai/STC to grab your spot. Link is in the show notes. Welcome. Today we are talking about staff training. I did that for many years in my studio business. I think it's really important, especially now as we come to the end of the year. Obviously, training is an ongoing process, no doubt. There's ways to do that. That could be, monthly check-ins, quarterly meetings, monthly meetings, new staff coming into the room and making sure that you're observing and giving feedback, etc. So there's ways to do it throughout, no doubt. But I always liked making sure that we started the year fresh with our beginning of year compulsory, by the way, team staff training session. This is where I'd bring all of our team together. This included all of our teaching staff as well as our administrative staff, just to keep everyone in the loop. Now, the admin team wouldn't necessarily attend all of the hours that the teaching staff would, and vice versa, but there'd be some connection points. So it just depends. Now, I had someone working remotely in my administrative team, and they would just zoom in to the live in-room session. I highly recommend doing this beginning of year training session with your team in person, because it is a moment for them to actually come and connect and bond, and for the team to actually create some camaraderie and also give some connectivity to the business. Now, if you have multiple locations, this is even more important because people from different locations may not know each other. So come to a communal space, and by the way, like I said, this is a compulsory day, making sure that everyone is available and confirmed, yeah? And it's also paid. It's paid. So, we had a training day rate in our contract, and we provided catering, etc. Now, let's start with what to include. So I would do a full day training session. This was anywhere from, 6 to 8 hours, depending on what we were covering, which seems like a really long day, but so what? And I think it's an important day to have. This is where we'd come together, and I'd always start with culture. So culture being the very first part of the session. And this is where we talk about our code of conduct, essentially, our moral code. We'd have several points of our moral code, which I always would make sure that everyone was on board with. And, those are no toxic people allowed, positivity, etc., whatever, like your values listed. We had about 7. We had one called blood money, which essentially talked about how money is the lifeline, our bloodline of the business, and it's to be respected. So we talk about what that actually looks like. So for example, respecting property, making sure that, if you have to put pens out on the reception desk, that you pack them away at the end, like little bits and bobs. If you're in charge of handing out flyers, that those flyers are then not thrown into a kit never to be seen again or crunched up, like those cost money. So we make sure that we fold them properly and we return them back to our manager, etc. Whatever the thing is, we'd talk about no toxic people allowed meant that we don't talk to each other negatively. We don't talk about me behind my back to each other, vice versa. Teachers don't talk to each other negatively about students or other teachers or their peers, and we'd have a person that they could come to and actually soundboard their issues, and we'd make sure that they had contact points for different types of issues and who that person was. And if I wasn't approachable, there was a 2IC put in charge that they could speak to about me, for example. Like code of conduct in every scenario, and culture is so important. So culture was always the first thing on the board whenever we started our training. We also would, make sure that we included the team in the conversation, like what's important to them and what does that look like, and have they experienced those moments where maybe they weren't respected at the workplace, or what does that look like, etc. So I think, opening up the conversation is really, really important, and engaging them and getting them to converse and contribute to the ideas is also equally important, especially if you want to keep them engaged for an entire day. You need to be asking them questions. We even had some things where they would write down their answers. For example, we'd also then do a reflection on the end of year showcase, and we'd go, okay, so now we're going to move to our end of year showcase. I want you to write down on the piece of paper in front of you what really worked and what didn't work, and then we're going to bounce around the room and see, what we can keep in regards to the show process versus, what might need refinement, adjustment, review, improvement. And just to speak candidly about that. So someone might bring up something that you never would have known. For example, oh my gosh, the minis or the preschools were a nightmare backstage because they had nothing to do. Okay, great. So let's introduce XYZ, entertainment, whatever, coloring in books, So I just think there's things that your staff will see and witness that you can get feedback from. So starting with, culture and your culture code, then moving on to, reflection of your show and the classes, getting them to actually write down, just taking a couple of minutes, guys, writing down, what worked, what didn't work. Let's soundboard that and go around the circle and discuss that. Yeah. Then after that, I would normally move on to particular systems and processes in the studio, things that, we would talk about. For example, how we greet new clients. What do we say? Is there, if you have welcome packs for new students, are the teachers in charge of giving those out? What does that look like? Trial forms, etc. Who's responsible? How does that work? When a new student arrives, what's the protocol versus an existing student? What's the protocols? What are the rules of the house? Can parents come in the room? Can't they? Making sure you're covering those bases, especially with trials and things, because sometimes you assume that people know to say, hello, welcome. They might not. That's a trainable moment. You need to set a standard of how people are treated in your space, how clients are treated. Roll call, just going over roll call, the importance of roll call, what that looks like, how roll call is done. If people have been slacking off, if your teachers are slacking off and not using the system, do a reminder, do a demo, get them to get out the app on their phone and do a demo with you. Just get them back in the flow of what the expectation is. If you do star of the week, student of the week, reminding them of that process and what that looks like. For example, we used to do photos, a photo of the child and post it in our private Facebook group. So that was our process, but it was same day. So they had to do it same day. There was no going home. It was in the moment. It was there and then. So if they don't do that, then there's a lack of consistency, and consistency is really important. And by the way, that was one of our immutable laws, codes of conduct was the importance of consistency. So consistency was one of the key ingredients for our success. And so when that drops, it means something. Like if one of the kids is chosen as star of the week and then they're not posting in the Facebook group, but everyone else was the week before, they all of a sudden feel less than. Or if you have a birthday card policy and your office staff is in charge of sending those out and they don't, that lacks consistency. So that means that kid got the birthday card and the other one didn't. It's almost worse than not sending them at all and not even having that as like a bonus feature as part of your customer love. So, consistency matters. Talk about those consistency points and where and when that happens and the importance and the process around that. When it comes to administration, following up those trials and newbies after the lesson, or those check-ins with existing clients, like what does that look like? What's the time frame? And making sure that those processes and procedures are happening, and do a refresher, open and close procedures. So, what does that actually look like? Do they have to wipe the mirrors at the end of the day? Like, go over those open and close procedures and those expectations and who's doing what and when. Yeah. Each venue, if you have multiple venues, might have a different close and open procedure. So go over that. Do they have to put an A-frame out and put it back and lock it in the cupboard when they walk back in? Is whatever. Do they have to switch off the lights, wipe the mirror, check the bathrooms? What's your policy when it comes to duty of care for the kids? Like, don't assume that people know that they have to wait with the last child before pickup. Like, what is the duty of care policy and procedure? How does that work? And at what point do they get paid for overtime if someone picks up their kid an hour late? If they have to stay on site and watch that kid, at what point? We used to have a 15-minute increment there. So, just being mindful of that sort of thing. How to handle particular client questions is another thing that we covered in our training. So we would have, particular questions that might be asked in the classroom, like an example, and this would be written and they could read them, and how to respond, especially when it comes to invoicing, payment, concert information, etc. Do your teachers actually know what to say to who and when? Don't assume. Oh, that's common sense. No such thing as common sense when it comes to staff. Assume in no such thing as I've been there for 20 years and I know what I'm doing. Refresher, especially if you update and refine your messaging and what your expectations are. They need to be just as involved in this training process as anyone else, your long-time staff versus newer staff. Staff timesheets, how do they log their hours? Go over that, making sure that everyone's up to date on those policies. Do you have a birthday or medical log spreadsheet? How does that work? Like, for example, if someone has an illness, allergy, or special need or disability, how do your teachers know about that? What is the process? Is there a spreadsheet they need to check each month? Reminders being sent, whatever. Like, what is the policy? That also goes for media release. So, how we talked about student of the week. there were some kids that couldn't have a photo. That doesn't mean they can't be student of the week. That just means we might have a template emoji face with a star next to it that goes up, and we say, congratulations, Johnny, from, junior jazz, Saturday junior jazz in Forestville, for being our student of the week this week, right? And Johnny has a media ban from the parents, so we don't post his photo, but we know that because it's listed and we get that. So we just do a tile, like it might be a Canva tile that we've preset for kids that aren't allowed to have their media shared publicly, but can still be celebrated and mentioned, right? So that sort of thing. What is your birthday's procedure? What does that look like? We would talk about open days. We would have open days coming up and open weeks coming up to promote the business in the new year, and what that looks like versus what the regular classroom looks like. Incident report forms, that was another one. So we would make sure that everyone had incident report forms in their teacher kits. We would have teacher kits where they would have like certain props and things like that. It might have gloves, toilet paper, incident report forms on a clipboard, trial forms, etc. So we would have that. And we'd also have for those locations where we were like, always there and had storage, then those teacher kits would be in storage, and they just get the box out at the beginning of the day and then lock the box up back in the afternoon when they're finished. And then we just go over those incident report forms. What does that look like? And also, who do they send it to? When do they send it? They have to send it same day. How do they title the email? Incident report form - child's name incident, etc. So there's lots to cover there. People always say, what do I do in a training day? Well, there's a lot to do, like I just said. That's before we've even talked about the new schedule and going over techniques and physical choreography, warm-up techniques, drama games, etc., vocal warm-ups, new preschool dance techniques in the classroom. Like this is just a sit-down meeting where we have discussion, we have integration, we include our staff in the conversation, with breaks, lunch, a bit of, mingling and socializing amongst the team, etc. So as you can see, just from me jabbering on, and I'm not just jabbering on, by the way, I'm going through a list of the things we used to cover. You can see that there's actually quite a bit there. So when people say, what do we actually do in a training session? Well, culture, code of conduct, your systems and processes, everything from how to welcome a new student versus, concert preparation versus class engagement. It can be even child development techniques, what's working, what's not, reflection points, what's working, what's not in the classroom, what's working, what's not in the show, what's working, what's not in the preparation of the production, etc., at theatre, and make sure you make notes, by the way, as the facilitator, as the studio owner, make notes on the what's not and what is working, because that's really important. And when it comes to the movement stuff, like I said, we would go over different training for the preschoolers, for example, different new games, new warm-ups, new activities and concepts. Teachers really appreciate this. Teachers super appreciate this. We would schedule that for a separate day. So the movement stuff we would film and do on a separate day to the sit-down administrative, more chatty boardroom style training, versus now we're going to move. When we did the movement, drama games, etc., all that stuff, we would film those activities and put them in a Google Drive folder, and the teachers would all have access. So they could go, gosh, I'm really dry on new games and warm-ups. What can I do? Oh yeah, we did a session on that, and I've got them all recorded, and I've got those notes on those as well. So that's really helpful. So there's that as well. So there's two separate sides of the training. There's the physical in-class process and development with the actual, delivery of the class or the choreography, for example. You may have to do choreography if you're delivering a musical theatre show, etc., that sort of training and filming, versus the more, let's sit down and nut this out in a boardroom style. I always start with the boardroom style. Yeah. And by the way, I would be very transparent about the growth or the decline of our studio numbers. I would tell them we have X amount of students re-enrolled. Congratulations, your classes are at capacity. Hey, Johnny, your classes are only half filled. Let's talk about that. What's going on in the room? Like, we would be extremely transparent about the results and the conversions of our trials and all of that. Like, I would have those metrics ready. I would know my numbers, basically. I mean, obviously, we're not sharing, profit and loss statements with our teachers and staff, but we are sharing those conversion numbers in the classroom and what that actually looks like. And it's good for them to know. It's actually good for them to know, because sometimes people think they're doing brilliantly and their class is empty. And I'm an amazing teacher. It's like, yeah, but you're not retaining your students. So what's happening in the room? Let's talk about that. And only when you go, okay, look, Lucy's classes are at capacity. Let's talk about why. What are you doing differently? And she might say, oh, I'm actually giving, stickers out to all of my preschools at the end and giving them a high five before they walk out the door. And it's like, oh, okay. So, and that sticker giving might be part of your essential process. So you might need to make sure that you provide that stock in your teacher kit, and we would have a list of what's in our teacher kit. So when it's running low, the teachers would let us know, hey, I'm running low on stickers, or, those wands are breaking. We don't have enough for all the kids. Can we get new wands and whatever? So, that might be an essential process, but sometimes you might not have that included, but a teacher has initiative and starts bringing that into the classroom. And then you might find that out later down the track and then go, right, so the stickers seem to be really popular and the kids are loving the high five on the exit. Maybe, why don't we all try that? We're happy to supply the stickers for you. Thank you for letting me know. Now we know that you're purchasing those stickers. From now on, we're going to purchase stickers and provide that in a teacher kit for you. And we're going to make it mandatory that all preschool teachers are handing out stickers at the end of their class. There may be a style of teacher that is not doing well. For example, a teacher who sends the kid out of the classroom for naughty, or a naughty corner for 3 minutes. And you might go, right, so that might not align to your values. And then you'll say, okay, so that doesn't align to our values, but I'm really glad you shared that with me. We're going to nip that in the bud now, and we're going to make sure that that's not happening. Let's talk about strategies around the behavior that's causing the concern. Hey, has anyone witnessed that behavior? What is the behavior? Let's talk about it as a team. Right, we're banning the naughty quarter. That's not working. Your classes have dropped in capacity. We think that militant style is probably outdated and not really doing any favors for, student retention, etc. We prefer the sticker and the high five. You know what I mean? So about more positive reinforcement stuff, whatever your style is. But I think the key here is that communication. Yeah, so communicating amongst the team. Also, when you set your schedule with the team, it's not just the weekly schedule. Give them the dates up front at your annual training session. So that big annual training session, give them the dates up front and include future team training days, which could be Zoom. So you might say, right, in 2 months, we're going to have a Zoom meeting on this day at 7 p.m. on a Thursday. No one has classes. I want you to block that in your calendar now. This is a compulsory Zoom session, and let them know it's paid. We're only going to keep you for an hour, but it's paid. Then you might go, okay, we are going to have our mid-year showcase is going to be on this date. We're going to have a Halloween disco. We need all the team there to support it on that date. We're going to also have a Christmas party on December 1st, a staff Christmas party. Please block that out in your calendar now. All staff, we want all staff to attend. This is important for our team camaraderie, okay? And so set the tone. Set the tone, set the expectation, give them the dates. You need to be organised. Now, I would always do this in January. Now, obviously, we're in New South Wales, Australia. You know, you make sense of it wherever you are in the world. I know we have a lot of US listeners. Actually, last couple of months, we've had more US listeners than Australian listeners, which really, I guess, surprised me as an Australian. But I love that. So welcome, friends, and thank you for listening. So, you know, your annual calendar might look different to ours just because of, you know, the seasonal difference between us and you. Right now we're in summer and we have, you know, 6 weeks off over the January period, which may not reflect your calendar. But essentially the point is, do it before the big year starts, whatever that makes sense. Like it could be a December meeting, a January meeting. I did it in January before the term 1 classes recommenced for the year. So do what makes sense for you, but do it. Yeah, book it in. And prepare for the meeting. So walk in with your key points and areas of discussion. You know, you might have some printed materials. You might have some discussion points that, you know, have a whiteboard, have, you know, your clipboards, do whatever that makes sense for you. I would just usually hire out because I wanted people to be comfortable. A club room, like an RSL boardroom, we would always hire that out, and we would have menus on the table, and it was private. It was a privately booked room, not too expensive, actually, very reasonable, a couple of $100 for the day we'd spend. And then I just at the beginning of the session, I'd give everyone a menu and say, okay, guys, just choose your lunch now. We're going to go and order that at the bar and have it delivered at 12 o'clock for lunch. You know, I'd bring up some soft drink jugs and water jugs, and there'd be like Minties and Mentos on the table, things like that. So, you know, make it comfortable. I'd have a coffee machine in the room, so tea and coffee available for them all day. Make it comfortable, yeah, and enjoyable. I think training days are so incredibly useful. It's also good for you as the business owner to sort of get your head on straight and give you a reason to get organized. See, when people are relying on you for dates and schedules and things, even if you have a date range, that's okay too. Or even if you say our Christmas party is going to be on December 1st, I don't know where it's going to be, but save the date. I'm going to book something for then, like whatever. But just give them those sorts of guidelines so that people can start realizing that you are a priority in their calendar, and actually say, okay, everyone, I want you to now add those to your calendar. I'll give you 5 minutes. Here are the list of dates, and hand it to them. Here are the list of important dates for 2026. And add these to your calendar now. I'll give you 5 minutes to do that, everyone. So take a beat and let's make sure that that's all in there. Yeah, that's it. Get them to action stuff in the moment. Yeah, I think that's a very important point too. The main thing is that you're there to support them, and you know, you're working as a team to develop and grow your business. Feedback is awesome, and not all feedback is golden, okay? I did an episode, actually, The Art of Feedback, Grow Without Crumbling. So if you flick back to episode 218, you'll know that, yes, we want their feedback, but not all feedback is valid feedback that you can implement. Like some of it might be like, oh my gosh, this would have been better if we had 3 costume changes, and that would have really portrayed the characters in that routine. It's like, yeah, that's great. And that would have cost me as a studio owner and a business owner more money. So that's not a viable option. Don't shut them down though. Let them talk. Thank them for their feedback. And then, you know, you're not going to implement that one because that's going to cost you a fortune, right? Just remind them of the immutable law of, you know, blood money. So, and again, I mean that in a way that's not terrible. I mean that in not like mafia or anything like that. We mean that in the way of the bloodline that keeps the business alive. And you need cash to keep the business alive, right? That's the truth. And it's good for them to know it. So things like that. But, look, keeping them in the loop, keeping them part of the conversation, receiving their feedback. Don't shut them down. Be open to what they're saying, but also move through the session swiftly. So block out how long you're going to spend on each category or area of conversation or training point, so that you don't run overtime and you don't waffle. So if you want to do a reflection on the show, that might be a 15 to 30 minute session. Like, it might be 30 minutes, but my point is schedule out and block out your time and make sure that you're staying on track. And if things start to fall off the bandwagon, start pulling it back in and saying, okay, guys, we're going to move on now. Does anyone have a final point before we move on? Because I want to make sure that we cover everything today. Great. Moving on to the next topic. We're now going to be talking about our enrollment process, or how to greet new customers. Okay. So, everything is important for discussion, but you are the leader of the discussion. Remember that. You're the leader of the discussion. You're the facilitator, and you are steering it in the direction that you need it to go. Okay. So keep in control of that. Obviously open-minded, open to suggestion, but you are controlling the process and you are the leader. So anyway, guys, I hope that really helps. And I hope that means that you're going to go away from this podcast episode and schedule your training date if you haven't already. And if you already have, I hope that I've given you some insights, some things to think about or contribute to your next training session to improve and expand upon it so that you get the best results from your team. Because at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. Thanks for listening. Have a great day, and I'll see you next week. Bye for now.
This episode is brought to you by Studio Talent Collective, helping you go from studio owner to talent manager with confidence. Ready to start your own in-house talent agency? Connect with me at josephinelancuba.com or via the links in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, please share, rate, and review. Thanks for listening, and keep shining.